All right. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. There's so many things. If I said how can we fix the world today, there's a million ways you can think of to fix the world. But today, specifically, what we're going to do and we're going to cover over this next hour or so is we're going to talk about something that is really a big problem. We're going to talk about something that is kind of kept in the shadows. And we're going to discuss a problem or what I would call a stronghold in many people's lives that really you don't know where to go to discuss it. And our guest is a friend of mine that I met. Now, we were introduced a couple of years ago, and you know how sometimes people say, hey, you guys should meet because you're equally yoked and you have a lot of the same thoughts. And what happens is you forget or communication gets lost. And then, wouldn't you know, last week, my friend goes, hey, have you talked to Frank yet? And I said, no. So I immediately called him. We had a conversation for like an hour, and I said, wow, yeah, you're coming on the podcast. Like, this is going to be good stuff. So his name is Frank Rich, and he's a former bodybuilder. He is a former men's health coach, and he is the host of the Superhuman Life podcast. It's called the Superhuman Life podcast. But most importantly, what he's coming on today, he's going to talk about battling addiction. Not just any addiction. You're going to want to be here for this one. Because for almost 20 years, Frank battled anxiety and depression. And finally, he came out of that and he crushed this stronghold, and now he's helping other people do the same. He's helped thousands of young men transform their lives and their physiques, but now he's helping them transform their lives spiritually. And he's also the CEO and founder of Rebuilt Recovery. And he's here to talk to us today, guys. Please welcome my good friend, Frank Rich. So Frank, the first question I want to ask you is if you're sitting there we always ask kind of what was the moment that you discovered something like flipped and you had to do something about this? What was that light bulb moment in your life where you said, hey, I got to kick this and something needs to change? How did that unfoil, if you could tell us that story?
But I had this moment of clarity while sitting in the morning one day, realizing like I wasn't the greatest version of myself because I had a secret life that I'd been living for over 20 plus years. I had an addiction that nobody else knew about. So that moment of clarity said, when Frank, your business isn't succeeding, your content isn't taking off because your message is fake. Your message is not real. You are not the greatest version of yourself. So how would you ever be able to lead anybody to the greatest version of their self? So I had this moment of clarity and real talk with myself. And a few weeks later, I'm sitting in the car with somebody on Valentine's Day, the day of love, right? We celebrate it with gift cards, flowers, all these amazing things. Been in a relationship for about 3.5 years at that point. And in this conversation, for the first time, I had a grown man admit to me that he had a problem with pornography, but he was working to overcome it. So I mentioned I had the moment of clarity a couple of weeks before that. I felt that conversation was God speaking to me. Now you need to take radical action on your life. So the moment of clarity came literally looking myself in the mirror, and then I took action on it a couple of weeks later.
Yeah, that's brave because sometimes the hardest lens to look through is that mirror, back at yourself. And we know that addiction is, well, it's called addiction in the secular world. I love when pastors and people in the faith-based world, they call it a stronghold. And a stronghold is something that it's like a door that I was described that just, it never closes. It's never fully closed because the devil will always try and open that door. And so you have to be consciously aware of when that door is trying to creep back open. So tell us exactly what this addiction was and how you came to really want to change your life because of it.
Yeah, so I'm 39, just turned 39 a couple of weeks ago. For a little bit of context, I was introduced.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I say I was introduced, but it's not like somebody actually said, here's pornography. I stumbled across pornography right around the age of 6. Being a nosy little kid, kind of going through dad's stuff, you pull a drawer out, you kind of lift up some socks and underwear, and you see, oh, there's these magazines that make you feel curious about what's going on the inside. So the introduction to pornography came at a very young, unequipped age. But it's important that the context of my age is important, because that was a magazine, right? That was like a Hustler. It wasn't what our kids have, access to today. But when I did get the internet at 15, within the first hour, I had already found it. When I got a BlackBerry at 21, so I was probably one of the first 1,000 people in the world to have a color screen BlackBerry, because I was working for T-Mobile at the time that phone was launched. Literally, so having a color screen BlackBerry, and for any of the young kids, a BlackBerry is the original smartphone. Like, you wouldn't have an iPhone today if the BlackBerry wasn't around almost 20 years ago. But same thing I did when I had a computer in my room for the first time. Having a computer with a color screen on my phone in my pocket now, was able to find pornography within the first hour as well. So as I navigated through my 20s and 30s, businesses and entrepreneurship and bodybuilding and corporate leadership success, all these things, like, this thing in my pocket always had a stronghold, or always had bondage over me. And it's interesting you said that, when you begin to take steps towards freeing yourself, the enemy will appear, right? And that came for me literally day one. So I mentioned I was having a conversation with my friend on Valentine's Day. So this man is a Marine, like somebody I hold a lot of respect for, somebody I really looked up to, and inspired me. And when he told me that he was struggling with a porn addiction, and he had for his entire life, like, it lifted a weight off of me that I'd never felt before. I felt so much pressure and shame and guilt that I could never talk about this with anybody, right? I've been caught it a couple times before in previous relationships, but I built barriers to never allow that to happen again. So thinking that I was going to be able to talk about this with other people was something I never really thought about. But when I heard another man say it, it's like, okay, here's my opportunity. And by me voicing it and committing it to him that day, that was going to change my life. That was when the enemy was like, I've lost grips on this guy, right? So literally, I told Zach that day, dude, I'm done with this. I need you to hold me accountable, but I also need to go home and tell Stephanie. So I was living with a woman at the time. We had been 3.5 years into our relationship. There had been talks of potential future, marriage, kids, all these exciting things that people, discuss at that point within a relationship. But I knew if we were to continue down the path together, she needed to know the truth. So I admitted to Zach, and I told Zach, I'm going to go home and tell Stephanie literally today, because she needs to know.
Okay.
A 30-minute drive or so that day. Go ahead.
Let's take this there. Let's break it down, because first of all, there's a couple things. Is men realizing that porn is not bad. There's this. First of all, when you and I spoke, we said, how are we going to handle this topic? And this is your platform. This is what you do. I've been pretty brave about it, but certainly not as bold and brave as you. And I love how you said, we're not going to skirt around it. We're not going to, pussyfoot around this topic. We're going to tackle it head on. And the first thing that we do to tackle this head on is what you said is, a lot of men don't see this as an addiction or a problem. They see it as normal. Actually, some men even say, well, this is a great part of being a normal heterosexual male, right? They say, this is a part of manhood. And so I bet you there's a lot of guys out there would even be afraid to admit to their friend that they feel like it's a problem, or they feel like it's wrong, because would that make me less of a man? No doubt, to a Marine, this imagery of manhood wrapped up in Marine, and you had the guts to say it, and he had the capacity to hear that from you and take it to the next level. And then I don't think a lot of people would have the guts right away to take it to the person that they're in a relationship with. So let's just break that down. If there's somebody out there right now listening, guys, it's not normal. It's really not. It's not a badge of honor. It's not cool. It's not great to show porn. It's not a victimless crime, and we'll get into that. But let's talk about what it means to be a man. And I'll tell you, guys, here's a guy who is a bodybuilder. And Frank, right? You are a bodybuilder. You are a good-looking guy, no problem getting women, successful guy. So let's take all the stereotypes away from it. What differs from you going out and having many relationships and fulfilling yourself sexually that way to saying, you know what, I'm just going to watch pornography?
Yeah, well, that's that word that you guys have in your intro, right? It's the instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, I think John Eldredge does the best job. I'm sure you're familiar with John's work, Wild at Heart, all of his other amazing books. What he says, and I think it's in Wild at Heart, what makes pornography so destructive and dangerous to young men is it supplies them everything they need from a woman, physically or sexually, without asking anything of him in return. So when we think about pursuing a woman or a wife, right? Like, or finding a potential partner, like, men are called to step up, right? Like you're
Sure.
not going to land an amazing woman in your life if you don't have value that you're bringing to her. If you're not a valuable man, a high value man, somebody that can provide, protect, preside over a family. So these are requirements of a man to bring a woman into his life. But pornography is going to bypass all those requirements. You don't need to become a man of value. You don't need to become a man that can protect and provide for others. If all you're seeking is a physical release, just go to the pornography, play with yourself a little bit, and you're going to get that release. So I think it hijacks masculinity at its core because it's going to give the men what they want sexually without requiring them to show up as a man to get it.
We really needed to stop for a second and focus on that, because that is an angle. That's a statement right there that I think is so true. It's a cop out. It's an easy way to get all the things that you want, and it's a quick fix, and it doesn't require you to do any of the thing that would be a man. Wow. That's powerful. You know, and do you think in your work with people, let's talk about why it destroys lives. I did a little bit of research, and it says here that the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers reports that 56% of divorce cases involve one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. Think about that. Over half of all divorce cases, according to the Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, say that at least one party is involved in having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. It is destroying marriages. It is the work of the devil.
Yeah, it's a powerful stat, man. And for me, you know, I always take a little bit different of an angle on a lot of these things, because I'm here not to save marriages. I'm here to save men. Because if we don't save the men first, we're never going to have marriages. So I bring it back even a layer closer to home and say it's impacting the men at various levels, right? It impacts obviously their spiritual life, you know, their connection to God. Like, how can you ever be closely connected to our Creator and our Savior if this is a part of your life? So it impacts that relationship. It impacts your mental health, your physical health, your relationship health. So fixing the man first has always been my purpose and my focus, but it interjects motivation, right? Like, I can't tell you how many young men I speak to in their early 20s. Literally was on a sales call today with a guy, has no motivation to go to the gym. He's like, I don't even clean my apartment. I have a hard time getting out of bed, because with this dopamine reward center, like, that is what's being hijacked. So these men suffer from just finding like meaning out of doing menial tasks out of life. So I think it impacts the men at such a deep level that they're not even equipped to go into relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, these are great points here that I don't think we even realize. I mean, I love how you took me back to that, and let's go back from marriage. Let's talk about what it means. Again, I'm not cleaning my apartment. I'm not doing the things I need to do because everything is right here. I mean, let's be honest. When you're in the animal kingdom, when you try and attract a mate, I've seen one of those wildlife documentaries, and it was a bird, and the male bird made this house, and he put the twigs just perfectly, and he took time to build this house, and he went inside. He made these beautiful calls, and it was this dance of seduction. And finally, the female bird, after going around, she went inside. So if we see it in the nature in the animal kingdom, certainly we should see it with us. And I think you just brought up a fantastic point there that a lot of people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story, man, or a description there of like animal mating patterns. Here's an interesting one that I think can tie into this conversation. So I believe it was in the 70s. Might have been late 70s, early 80s, out of Stanford. They were doing research on butterflies. And what they had done is they created like a butterfly ecosystem. What they wanted to do is they wanted to study butterfly mating patterns. So male butterflies, the attraction to females is size of the wings, kind of the vibrancy of the colors, and something with their eyes. So color, size, shape of their eyes. So the researchers knew this, that the female butterflies with the biggest, brightest wings and the biggest eyes, they get the male butterflies attracted to them. So to research this, what they started doing is inside of this ecosystem, they started injecting fake butterflies, right? Bigger wings, more vibrant colors, bigger eyes. Over time, what ended up happening is the male butterflies stopped going to the real butterflies to mate with and started giving all their attention to the fake butterflies. This is where the term supernormal stimulus came into play, right? Because the butterflies were just so in awe with the supernormal levels of these colors and the supernormal, levels of their eyes. When we think about pornography, what it does to a young man's brain is first, second exposure, it gives you supernormal levels of dopamine. Okay, dopamine is a chemical that is tied to motivation and pleasure. But if I know that pornography is going to give me a level 10, why would I ever go do the dishes that's going to give me maybe 2 hits of dopamine? Or why would I go to the gym that's maybe a level 4? Why would I work on passion projects, maybe a level 7, when pornography is going to give me a 10? We also can think about, okay, what is happening with women in the world? Why do women look like dolls? Why are their lips getting large? Or why are butts getting the size of Montana? It's because the men are becoming attracted to supernormal levels of what's being presented to them through pornography, right? So all of this is coming back to what's happening to the young man's brain, hijacking his dopamine, but beginning to change his attraction. Because here's a stat that blew my mind. Is a young boy today, in a matter of 30 minutes, can sit in front of a computer screen and look at and consume and see more naked women than your and I's grandfather or great-grandfather or probably our fathers would have done in their entire life. Ooh. Once again, a 12-year-old boy, in the matter of 20 minutes, can see more naked women in flesh than our grandparents would in their entire life. So it's just hijacking, and it's just changing the way that men even see women.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. The bodies are changing. The breasts are getting huge. The butts are getting huge. And we have an unrealistic view of what a woman should be. I was thinking about this podcast, and I was asking myself when I was first introduced to pornography, because, I'm in my late 40s, and we know now that it's more accessible through the smartphone. And I'm thinking to myself, but the average age, I think, what do you think, is 11 or 12, or is it earlier than that?
It's 11 right now, and I'm sure that's just going to get lower and lower.
So I'm thinking about myself, and I think it was probably right around that age, and this was, I remember exactly where it was, the Bo Derek Playboy issue. And just like you said, my friend saw it in his dad's bathroom. We opened it up, and I remember we didn't know what it was. We didn't know what was happening to us. I just remember him saying, "I feel funny." And I go, "I feel funny too," And then later on, it was literally, and this is going to date me, guys, it was literally like reel to reel. Like and the friend's dad had to go out of town, or the parents had to be gone for a while, and there was a reel to reel projector that you set up. I mean, think about that. So it was definitely harder to access. But when I think about what it's doing, and I love where this is going immediately, because I always try and think about who's listening right now, who's out there going, either it's their husband, or maybe it's their boyfriend, or maybe it's the man himself who's sitting there and going, I feel kind of lazy. I feel like I'm addicted to porn. I feel like it's robbing me from the joy from other spots in my life. And then it gets into the next thing I want to talk about is, how do we recognize it? We know that, man, testosterone is such a powerful thing. I mean, that when it gets into your mind and you start thinking about sex, sometimes it's almost impossible to stop. So there's a lot of self-control. You mentioned the Bible. When we go back to Adam and Eve, when they didn't know sin, and the first thing after she ate the apple, when God tracks down Adam in the garden, he says, why did you hide from me? And he's like, well, we were naked and ashamed. So that first part right there, that's what I want to get into. There's a heavy duty dose of shame that comes with pornography. There's that dopamine fix that you talked about. And when we look at other addictions, like a cocaine addiction or an alcohol addiction, it's sometimes escapism. Is pornography escapism? And where does the shame fit in?
Yeah, I think at the core of all addiction is the same underlying things, right? Escapism, lack of not feeling enough. Maybe there's trauma associated with certain things. So I think those roots are always the same. I love the shame conversation, because I think I have a really unique perspective that can really help a lot of people. But when we think about the word shame, like ultimately, what are we saying if we say we have shame about something? Shame is attached to, I see myself as a bad person. Okay. Yep. Guilt, on the other hand, is I'm a person that is doing bad things. I'm guilty for what I did. Shame is I'm guilty for who I am, or I'm bad because of what I do. How do you break that? talk about it, right? Like if you're unable to talk about something because you're worried about somebody's judgment, that in and of itself is showing you that you have shame because you're worried with their perception of you if you say what it is you're doing, probably telling you that you have a bad perspective on who you are. You don't see yourself in a positive lens. Well, how do you break that? You got to get acceptance from somebody else. So I think any person that would be struggling with this, how do you get out of this? You got to find somebody safe, right? You got to find a Zach in your life, somebody that you can trust, somebody that you can have that real open, vulnerable conversation. And David, I'm sure you've done this before, right? You've had conversations with, I'm sure, men's groups or maybe mentors in your life. Maybe as you were navigating your own struggles, you're like, hey man, I've been struggling with this thing. If it's the right person and they truly do care about you and he's a real man of God, he's not going to judge you. He's not going to shame you. He's not going to degrade you for what you're doing. 99.9% of the time, as long as that's the right person, he's going to put his arm around you and say, you know what, brother, we've all been through this. This is every man's battle. The biggest part that's going to change your life, though, is this conversation right now. So shame literally is us telling ourselves we're a bad person. It's like one layer above death in like the scale of consciousness from Dr. David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. So I think talking about it, talk about it with a pastor, talk about it with a mentor. Men, don't go talk about it with your wife right now because you need to kind of have a little bit of understanding of what she's going through before you bring that to her. But find a man in your life that you truly trust and respect, and just begin.
Yeah, you talked about on your Instagram post today. You talked about finding a male mentor. You know, and then it's interesting because when we look at our circle of friends, and when we take that journey, and gosh, I think we think that sometimes we think that we're the only ones or nobody will understand. You know, and you told me some stats there. I don't know if you still have them about, you know, how many people are actually watch pornography. I have some stats here. How many people in the church even, and so we think, who can we trust? Who would we go to? And who is this man? And how do I even bridge that conversation? It's almost like ripping a Band-Aid off, right? You can think of a million ways to do it, but at the end, you just got to come out and say it. So what are your advice for that?
Yeah, man, rip the Band-Aid. Because at the end of the day, man, like what is bleeding to death ultimately going to do for you? You know, so I think for me, that was it. People are like, how did you just openly talk about this? It's like, I was so fed up with living the other way. I was so fed up with where I was, man. If we truly think about this life and we live in gratitude and we're grateful for the day and we're grateful for the life, but also grateful that this is the only one. Like, so am I going to become the man that God has created to be, or am I going to live in bondage for the rest of my life? So I don't have a great answer to this one other than you just got to pull the Band-Aid off, man. And it's going to be painful for maybe a minute, but here's the interesting part, man, because pain and pleasure work on a cycle, right? That's why pornography makes you feel good in the moment, and then a day later you feel like crap again. So you got to go get more pornography because there's a cycle to it. People know this from working out, right? Yeah. Like working out is painful in the moment, but you feel better afterwards, right? You feel better when you have the body that you want. You feel better when you get those endorphins. So working through the pain of having the conversation is only going to be painful in the moment, but lifting yourself out of that shame is going to begin to produce some pleasure in your life. And if you can realize that with every pain comes a pleasure followed, then this is going to be a process that you actually begin to seek the pain and seek the discomfort. Why do people get in cold plunges every single morning? Yeah, it's got some amazing benefits. It makes your brain feel good. It kind of gives you some discipline, but they know that if I sit in ice for 3 minutes, I'm going to be discomfortable. I'm going to be incredibly comfortable for the rest of the day because pain and pleasure work in a cycle. So pull the Band-Aid off, man.
Oh man, you know, listeners, we're talking again here to Frank, and Frank has an entire podcast, and his platform is devoted to this. And you would think, okay, well, if it was just a little part, and if it just meant a little bit, Frank, you would talk about it once in a while. But I love how committed you are to it. So it must have been a deep passion of yours to say, hey, you know what? I'm not just going to kick it for myself, and I'm not just going to help a couple friends of mine or people who come to me once in a while, but I'm going to go out there into a space where a lot of guys would probably not venture to go. So I want you to give us a little bit, if you can be vulnerable with us for a second, give us a little bit of an insight into how it affected you, you know, as deep as you want to go. You know, you don't have to tell us every story, but I think listeners need to go, was this a guy just had a little bit of a problem with it? Tell them where you were, because I think then we can transition that into why it's such a passion of yours to help other people. I think to know where you've been will help us understand why you've dedicated such an enormous part of your life and your passion to this.
Absolutely, man. And I think I'm just like you, man. Like my entire life, I just wanted to be a resource that could help others. You know, whether that was in the corporate leadership roles that I held, in the sales training management, in the bodybuilding career and training that I did, to now the podcasting and coaching that we're doing. Like I just want to be a tool and resource. And I think that this is actually why I'm here. But for me, man, I think, you know, a couple things that maybe kind of, you know, bring it home with people. So I worked in the wireless industry in my early 20s. So this is going back to the early BlackBerry days, the Motorola Razr phone. Like I was a part of the launch for that for T-Mobile. But what was interesting is by a very young age, so 22, 23, like I had accelerated myself into kind of upper management. So I was overseeing a couple different locations. I'd drive through malls and this and that. Spent a lot of time in the road and spent a lot of times in shopping malls. So we were the kiosk locations in most malls. But in most malls, you have a few big department stores, right? You have a Dillard's, Macy's, maybe there's a Nordstrom. One thing about all those stores is if you spend a lot of time in malls, you realize those become the private restrooms. So as somebody that was making six figures in his early 20s, was leading teams, and I had a staff and employees of 50 people at some point, I would go to these malls and locations, and most oftentimes before I actually showed up to the kiosk, I'd make a stop in one of the big department stores, find a private location to, you know, sit down with my phone, and I'd watch porn and masturbate, literally in private restrooms. I also I think I told you this when we spoke last week, because I was at an event. So I've been attending business events and seminars for years now. I'm the guy that's entrepreneurial driven. I just want to be around people. But I was at an event with somebody that now is one of the top 3 Facebook advisors in the world, incredibly successful. We were sharing a hotel room, and I'd gotten up early. We were in San Diego. I said, hey man, I want to go down to the gym. I want to get a workout before the day starts. Knowing I wasn't going to the gym, knowing that I couldn't watch porn in the room with him being there, I went downstairs into the lobby restroom and found a place where it's completely private, consumed porn and masturbated there in the hotel lobby of a 5-star hotel in downtown San Diego. Now, the reason that story is coming up today, because the embarrassment came when I returned, when I tried to get back onto the elevator to get up to our room. It was one of those elevators that you need your key card to actually get it turned on to go upstairs, but I didn't have my key. I didn't have a key to get into back into the room. So number one, the person I was staying with knew I didn't go to the gym because you need a key to get into the gym. I had to go tell the front desk, hey, can you call a room up and can you let them know that I'm downstairs? Now, we never had the conversation, but it was something that still to this day, like when I see him, we're still friends. We attend events together. Probably at one point I will tell him, but that was it, man. Like I was out there chasing greatness. I was having an impact. I was pursuing bodybuilding and training in entrepreneurship, but I was carrying a second life. And I think that's why that moment of clarity came for me at the beginning, where it's like, you're living a double life, man. Like how much longer are you going to go living like this, or are you going to radically accept it and begin to make the changes? So I don't know if I really answered your question there.
No, it is. It is a double life. It's a secret life. And I love how you separated guilt from shame. And now we're getting somewhere when we talk about, look, it's interrupting your life. And there is a certain amount that you can do. And then we talk about what the word says. What does God say? How, if we're talking out there, and granted, our listenership is, a majority of them are Christians and believers, but you even told me there's a lot of people in the church and pastors. And what we have is this infiltration, and we have it's almost like this secret society. And even when you say the word masturbate, and listeners, right now that's uncomfortable, right? If I say I masturbated or somebody masturbated, it's one of those things that half the people will be just like, oh, or maybe everybody, but in the back of our minds, then it's like, are we really that different? Like, is it the stigma, and then we look at porn and we look at what it means and the people that are in it and how it ruins lives, I want to get into a little bit about that part. I want to get into what the church is saying. I want to get into a little bit about even that word masturbation. But when we talk about how it ruins lives, I was looking this up, and it says that a survey of porn actresses said that 97% of porn stars use drugs. And 88% of this is what really gets me. 88% of the scenes contain acts of physical aggression, and 49% of the scenes contain acts of verbal aggressions. So these are the top selling films. It's not normal sex. I sent you that one TED talk about this guy that was talking about pornography, and he says, you notice it's always in the angles. They never show people face to face. They never show really the kissing part. It's usually always just the penetration, and it's physical and it's violent. And God didn't mean for us to have physical, violent sex. You know, even most of the pornography, when we think about like doggy style and things that are very popular, it takes away from the missionary face to face. It takes the humanity out of sex. It makes the woman submissive, and it makes the man dominant. And they're both facing the same direction. And then when you get into a marriage or a relationship, man, after you've been watching that your entire life, this is what gets me, is that your wife doesn't want to have a relationship where she's submissive and you're dominant and you're not looking at each other. That's not lovemaking. That's pornography, and it's unrealistic. And that's where I get fired up about, because we're sending a message to people that is unrealistic, and it's violent, and it's hurting people. And a lot of people will look at this addiction as a victimless addiction, unlike a violent drug addiction or gambling addiction. It's not. So let's talk about the church. Let's talk about what God says. Let's talk about how we can really, as two men here that are normal men with normal sex drives, but two men that found Jesus, and know that a real man is able to close these doors. A real man is able to focus on this and do the things that he needs to do to lead his family.
Absolutely, man. And there's a story I share. I want to stay on that. What fires together wires together. That's using pornography as sex education, right? You know, we touched on it a little bit with the youth, and they're getting exposed to it at 11, 10 years old right now. So the fact that nobody's having conversations with these kids, this is where they're going for their sex education, right? There was a talk that I heard gave by Garrett, the founder of Fight the New Drug. Anybody that doesn't know Fight the New Drug, definitely something you want to share in the show notes. Incredible organization, just raising awareness of the dangers of pornography, sex trafficking, and all that's linked together. The founder was giving a talk at an event, and I heard him describe this scenario with, I believe it was a family that he knew. So there was a young boy, 12, 13 years old, excited, got his first girlfriend. Hey, mom, dad, I want Becky to come over for a date night at the house. Are you guys cool with this? Family was fully in support of it. Yeah, we're going to set you up in the driveway. We'll pull the projection screen out. You guys can have like a little drive-in movie experience at the home. Young kids, teenagers, right? But it's all done at home. So they set the kids up in the car, movies playing. Like, hey, we're going to check on you guys in an hour or so. Parents come out about 45 minutes later. Movie's on. They look in the car. The kid is leaning over the center console, and he's got his hands wrapped around the girl's throat, and he's choking her. Instantly, the parents pull him out. What the hell is going on? What are you doing? What are you doing? He looks at him, genuine as can be, like completely innocent. Dad, I love her. Isn't this what I'm supposed to do?
Wow.
You think about what you said there, right? You know, that whatever the number was, 80% of all porn has abuse in it, the verbal abuse. The number one search term is actually teen in pornography. And we think about the minor attracted person that's trying to get pushed on society as well. Sounds like a byproduct of a lot of people consuming teenage pornography, right? So we just have to understand, once again, what fires together, wires together. The male brain isn't fully developed till 26, 27 years old. That means they got 16 years of consuming this while their brain is being developed. So massive part of what I'm trying to do here is just raise awareness by having these type of conversations. But to get back to the church piece here, so I saw a study, I believe it was done out of 2019 by Barna Research, said 57% of pastors, 57% of all pastors admit to having a problem with pornography that is outside of their control. 64% of youth pastors admit to having a problem with pornography outside of their control. And only 7% of churches will actually have a program, course, or something working towards dedicating to helping men with it. So there's a major problem within the church. And I'm not here to bash the church. I think that there's varying reasons why. I think it's the age of the leadership. I think sometimes with something as big as like the overarching church, like it takes a lot to kind of be begin to get some change moving, which is why I did plant my flag as deeply as I could. Here I'm a solo guy building a company. I can move a lot quicker than thousands of churches all at once. So we're seeing incredible, impact through our work. I've had multiple pastors, ministry leaders, and church staff and employees go through our programs. What I would like to see, man, is I just like to see it really become one of the main things that you talk about with men. I participated in multiple kind of men's groups. So, the church I go to, it's a big mega church. So they go through these semesters, 8 to 10 week cycles of kind of a men's group organization. Going through this multiple times and having hundreds of men collected all in a room, and this conversation not coming up once, to me is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the men.
Amen.
It's a disgrace to the church. Because you said it right, 56% of all marriages that end up in divorce have this as a problem. So I think the church in and of itself is doing a very poor job, but I do feel it's beginning to get more accepted. I mean, my hope and prayer is that one day I'm no longer needed to do this.
Well,
but
amen. And I love the work you're doing. And one of the things I remember as a young kid, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I remember being like, geez, it must have been 13 or 14, never even kissed a girl at this point. I had a real conversation with my mom. I said, Mom, but I'm starting to get all these weird feelings and I'm so attracted to girls. And then, I think it was maybe a year later, I said, why? I questioned her. I said, Mom, you got to help me out. Why would God give me all of these hormones? Is it a test? What am I doing? And, I looked at some of the books of the Bible, and I was starting to read it back then. And I thought to myself, but people were very young when they got married, right? We know they were married early in their teens, and maybe delaying marriage. Certainly we see people delaying it, and Lord knows I did, is you're trying to deal with these hormones and stay abstinent for all of these years. But what we realized, again, and I was talking with some Christian men, I said, there's the one scripture in the Bible that says, if you even lust at a woman with your eyes, you should pluck your eyes out. And kind of jokingly, I said to the men, I said, how many of us, what age would you have been blind if you took that verse literally? I'd have been blind at 13. And what we're trying to say is, it's not a literal verse, but the lust is. God doesn't want you to literally pluck your eyes out, but it's the control over oneself and the control to know lust. And even beyond porn, which you and I talked about, Frank, we have this little thing called Instagram today, and it's like softcore porn. And I'll tell you what, I'll be honest, if you were a friend of mine and you're a female and I haven't seen any of your stuff or responded, that's probably because it was softcore porn. And what I do is I unfollow those things because I am in a committed relationship to my wife, my queen, and I don't want anything to tempt me. I won't even put things before me that tempt me. I'd rather just take it out of my vision, out of my periphery. And those people say, oh, it's just, you and I talked about this, especially being in the fitness community. I was a trainer for 20 years. You were a trainer. It's there. This is just the girl's body. She's just posing. That's just her glutes. No, it is softcore pornography. And you can tell me it's not, but I know it is because I know why those sites, I know why there's a girl who's got 300,000 followers and she's a fitness person because it's not her biceps that people are looking at. Every other thing is her butt doing squats. And so let's not be naive and say that. Even when I met my wife, she was in the fitness industry, and I literally told my friend, I said, I was supposed to interview her, and I said, don't send me. Don't send me because I know that I'm going to be attracted to this woman, and I've been dating the wrong women that look like this, and I don't want to get sucked into another relationship with that. And luckily it wasn't that way, but talk about that. Talk about the softcore porn, the introduction to it. What constitutes pornography, and how are we being led to believe that that's not really bad?
Yeah, brother. I love this conversation, man. And here's the powerful thing that I can speak to from my own experience and being in the trenches with hundreds of men over the last couple of years is when you stop treating all the women in your life as objects for pleasure, the women that present themselves to the world as objects no longer are attractive to you. Meaning when you stop looking at women through that lens, those women are no longer even there. I was the same way, bro. Like I 100% justified. I'm following this page because she's got the Fit Pro title in her name. She's #FitFan. Me too. Good job. Now I'm going to go watch porn because I saw your butt and it got me excited. It's the edge effect, right? Like if I told you that pornography is going to give you a 10 hit of dopamine, doing the dishes is 2 because it's not really aligned with like bigger goals. Eating healthy and working out is 4. working on a passion project is a 7. Well, Instagram is maybe going to give you a 10, right? It's going to, or an 8. It's going to give you more than you would get like just doing like meaningful work, but it's not going to bring you to the point of pornography. But most addicts don't have the ability to approach the edge without eventually at some point falling off the cliff, right? This is why if you're going through alcohol recovery, your sponsor, whoever you're working with, dude, you need to stay out of the bar, man. You know, if you're struggling with substance abuse, you got to cut off the friends that you used to do drugs with. My interpretation of ripping the eye out is you got to cut off all the access entry points of pornography in your life. If your eyes is what's causing you to fall into lust or to fall into sin, cover your eyes. If it's the gateway of Instagram is the pathway to you eventually finding pornography 4 hours later, shut it off. Get it out of your life. You will be better served for yourself and your future wife if you can overcome and transcend this now within the moment. But I think the biggest thing that I've been able to kind of get some clarity on is when you stop conditioning yourself that these women that present themselves as objects are what's attractive, quick, like you will change what is attractive to you.
So good. It's so, you know what? I'm so glad you're saying these things. I mean, everything that you're saying, I'm like, man, your platform definitely needs to be heard. I'll give you an example too, is what we see now is a lot of guys sending guys text messages that end up with stuff that's pornographic. And I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was living in Arizona. I had a good buddy come to visit me. We've been buddies for a long time. We had a couple of drinks at the bar, had a great meal. And later on that week, you know, he was sending me jokes, and it started off as a joke, and then it went right in. It was a video, and it went right into a porn scene. And I was at this point, you know, I'd already discussed pornography with my wife. I had, you know, stopped watching it after I think the first year of our marriage, and altogether, and I haven't watched it since. But you know, I was an avid watcher before that. And at this point, I discussed with Angelique, and I said, babe, you know, I don't even want this stuff in front of me. And you know, my friend sends it to me, and I don't know if he's a believer or not, but regardless, I got to find a way, you know, as a man to step up, if not for anything, for myself, to prove that I can have this conversation. Again, we take a step in maturity to become a man. And I said, as a man, and certainly a man of God who is trying to lead other people to Jesus Christ, I have to step up here and prove that I can do it. And she's like, well, just do it then. Just send a message. And I send a message. I said, hey, brother, you know, I understand that these jokes are funny or you think they are, but I go, I'm really on a walk right now looking to get deeper into, you know, my walk with Jesus. And I can't have anything like this come across my screen. And I certainly don't want it to look at it because it's an offense to my wife. And I said, I just, you know, it's not anything in our friendship. I still want to be friends, and I don't want you to take this personally. And I go, just please don't send it to me. And here's the thing, man. When I was sending that message, my heart was kind of racing, and I was like, oh, gosh, I hope he doesn't, you know, come back and say, what a jerk or anything, because look, we were buddies. And he didn't. He came back and said, no, bro, I totally understand. Perfect. Because I apologize. I won't do it anymore. See, I'm not saying that right now. You're probably the first or second person I told that story to, Frank. I'm not saying that right now to say, look at me. I'm saying that to say, you got to step up and take control, because that's where you started off this podcast. It's about control of your life. It's about stepping up and saying, hey, you know what? I am not going to live to achieve half my goals. I'm not going to live to just be okay. I want to go over the top. And if porn is holding me back, that's one of the things I'm going to use. I'm going to use my own self-control. I'm going to prove to myself that it does not have a grip or a vice on me, and that I can beat it, just like any other addiction.
Love that, brother. I mean, what I heard there is leadership, man. Like, you stepped up through self-leadership first, but you begin to lead your friend. Now, whatever he does with your leadership after the fact is his choice and decision. But as men, more importantly, as Christian believers, men, like, we are called through discipleship and just through the Bible, right? We are here to protect, serve, most importantly, lead. Whether we must lead ourselves first. And guys that are struggling with pornography struggle with self-leadership, but then we lead the group of men around us, right? Like, that's really what stood out to me there, is what an incredible leader David is, first in his life, in his marriage, but more importantly in his friendships, because you're now leading this man down the path of righteousness, down the path of purity in his own heart. Like, but what he does with that is up to him. But that's what really jumped out at me, man, was that leadership from you that you exemplified there.
Well, I appreciate that. And the other thing I would say is, you know, if you're not at that step yet, guys out there that are watching this or listening to it, if you're not at that step yet and you do get some of these messages, then one of the best things to do is just don't respond. You know, if your buddies send you 10 messages and 3 of them are vulgar, don't respond to the 3 ones that are vulgar. And eventually they'll get the point. Like, Frank, if I sent you 10 messages and 3 of those are pornographic, right? And you respond to each of the 7, you know, like football games, hey, that's a great game. The concert, yeah, that's a great song. And then the pornography, you're just silent. Guess what I'm going to do as a normal human being? I'm going to like, let me make an assumption here. Frank doesn't want me sending him porn. It's not his thing, and I'll stop doing it. So sometimes silence speaks volumes.
Absolutely, man. So powerful what you're sharing here. And just for anybody out there that's interested, if anybody sends me 10 messages, you're probably not going to reply back to any of them. Just that's how I operate.
Well, here's 2 things. I got 10 minutes left with you, and I got a great question for you at the end. But here's a couple of things that just in statistics, when we talk about the disconnect, you talked about pornography being, it's a disconnection, and it's no longer the face-to-face lovemaking that God intended between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. And we're seeing really what I would consider a very scary trend into getting more and more disconnected from the human side. If we look back at the 70s and 80s, that pornography, I mean, as bad as pornography is, it was 2 humans. What we're seeing now in these statistics, this is, I just looked this up yesterday. One of the number 1 searches in the whole porn industry is this thing called hentai, which is, it's like the anime, like the Japanese style of anime. And it's basically professional productions with these animations and 3D generated scenes of people that aren't even real.
Yeah.
And that's kind of creepy because now we're really taking the human side out of it. And then I think another thing we see is in 2021, trans searches grew 141%, you know, making it the 10th most watched category by male visitors. So we're really now even going down even darker corridors. If you look at a stronghold, we're opening up these other demonic dark corridors of pornography that have a whole different psychological mindset to them that, Frank, I mean, what does that tell you about where it's going? And it's kind of scary.
Yeah, man. And I think what you just shared there gives some credibility to my explanation of a butterfly research study. Like, what the hell do butterflies have to do with pornography addiction? I think we just saw it, right? So if the butterflies were no longer attracted to real ones because the fake ones implanted into their ecosystem had everything at a supernormal level, then that's why we're seeing men now consuming supernormal, animated, highly produced, highly graphic, right? Because the normal vanilla sex, this is an addiction known as the desensitization effect, right? Anybody that has had anybody in their life that has struggled with substance, alcohol, whatever, think about that person's journey to wherever they ended up hitting rock bottom. If you're downing a fifth of whiskey every single night, you've had some levels of progression, right? Like, alcoholics don't start there. You normally start partying, kind of gateway stuff. Then it becomes a kind of a pattern of behavior. Then they're like, well, the beer isn't working, so let me move on to a lighter liquor. So there's this escalation effect of what you need more and more of the same thing to produce the same effect. Same thing with drugs, right? Yeah. This is why, marijuana has been a gateway. Not that everybody that smokes becomes a drug addict, but you don't become a drug addict without having to go through some type of gateway tunnel first. So when we hear all these stats, when we hear what people are watching, what they are consuming, this is just showing us the severity and how big this thing really is. Because I can tell you, all of those people that are consuming that, all of those people that are involved in Natasha's work with the human trafficking side didn't start there. They have to go through the pornography tunnel first to end up at that point. That's why you'll hear a lot of people on the human trafficking side of things talk about human trafficking as the marketing department for the pornographic industry, or pornography is the marketing department for human trafficking. I'm sorry, I had those reversed around, because you don't end up at that point with having gone through that tunnel first.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the what's normal at first becomes mundane, and then you're looking for something crazier and then it leads down a different path. Whew. Okay.
Yeah. And then when the porn stops working, right? What's next? Massage parlors, escorts, prostitution. That stops working because people won't consent to doing the things you need them to do. Then you end up in Natasha world, right? Is you have to buy sex from trafficked individuals to do whatever you need them to do, because people won't willingly consent to the acts.
Oh man, it's such Ladies and gentlemen listening, it's such an important topic. I'm so glad we're addressing this today, and it's something that I don't want you to wash your hands of and say it's not me. I don't. It doesn't pertain to me. We are where we are today because of these exact things that Frank is talking about. I applaud him for having the courage, the guts, and the drive really to do this. I've watched your Instagram channel, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of information. Every day it's good stuff. Every day it's stuff that's presented in ways that it's just, here it is, and this is how you beat it. We're not, like I said, we're not beating around the bush. It's right there. So I'm going to ask you this one last question, and I want you to really think about it. I'll set it up this way. I'm a 25-year-old guy, embarking on, the first part of my career. I'm seeing some success. I live by myself. I want to get married and have a good relationship, but maybe I'm 5 years away from that. And I am deep in the throes of a pornography addiction. And you're telling me that I should stop. And I'm saying, well, why? What's it going to do to harm me? I want you to tell me 2 or 3 things that you would tell to a young man saying, this is what's going to happen. And this is how your life can be better. Because that's what we're trying to convince people of. Not that this is just bad, because some people say, well, I don't have that faith you do, or I'm not hurting anybody. I want you to tell somebody, that young man out there, or maybe it's the man who's 10 years into his marriage and he's in his mid-30s, or maybe it's the guy who's 20 years into his marriage, regardless of who it is. What's the benefits, Frank, of putting the brakes on this addiction?
First off, to that young man, 25, I'll use him first because that was how you set the question up. I would acknowledge and congratulate that young man for where he's already at in his life. Hats off to you, bro. 25, doing the things that you're doing, already stepping into a career, knowing what you want out of life, making changes out on your own, building a foundation, a firm one that you're going to be able to build a life off of. Hats off, man. You're ahead of the curve, at least from what I'm seeing in the world today. There's a lot of 25-year-old men that aren't at that point. I wouldn't tell him anything, though, is I'd ask him a couple questions. How clear on what you want out of life are you? How truthfully, radically, honestly clear on what do you want? And then the second question to that is, who do you need to be in order to create the life that you want? It's incredible. You're at 25, you got a great job, you got a house, you're doing all these things. What does the next 10 years look like for you? If we could go forward in time, you're 35. What does the life look like? What does the family? What is your wife's name? What color hair does she have? What home are you guys living in? Is it in the city? Is it in the suburbs? You guys on a lake house? Get really, really clear on what you want out of life, but then you must follow that up with, who must I become? And what this does is this creates a vision gap within your life, because you'll know where you currently are. You did a great job of describing that for that man. In order to create that life, though, there's going to be a gap from who you are today in order to get the life that you want. And if there wasn't a gap, you would already have the life that you want. So people can't answer this question, well, I'm already the person I need to be. Well, no, you're not, because you'd already have that life. So you must be radically honest with yourself. Create this gap. And then you tell me how your pornography addiction plays the role in you continuing to become the person you want to be. So I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm here to ask questions. That's what a coach does. And I think with anybody, I could lead them through a series of questions for them to reveal to themselves why they need to make the changes and get it out of their life.
I like that. I like it a lot, because I think it comes from a point of understanding as a coach and not from a point of judgment. And I think the best way to convince somebody of something is to let them talk themselves into it, right? Let them realize that, wait, this is not where I'm supposed to be going. And so as we wrap it up, tell us where are the resources? You already said, Fight the New Drug. That's not yours, but that's a good resource. Tell us where they can find you, some of the resources, and what you're working on in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the Instagram. So we're very active on all the social platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, at Coach Frank Rich. It's the same on all 3 platforms. So you can just search us in the bar there. Most of them are linked together. In terms of, like resources for the men. So I have a free book. It's called The 7-Step Guide to Living a Life Without Porn. Simple ebook, strategies, tactics to really walk you through creating a life 100% porn free. Things we're excited about, man. We've seen some real tremendous growth with the podcast here over the last 6 months or so, really beginning to make some headway there. Our group coaching, man, is really where it's at, though. So for guys that are really looking to make dramatic change in their life, we launch one group cohort per month. We get about 8 to 10 guys packed in that, create an incredible, strong community and brotherhood of like-minded men that are all taking back control and rebuilding their lives. Got a really exciting things kind of on the docket, though, in terms of like upcoming projects. So I partnered with a Navy SEAL on a year-long curriculum that'll kind of be phase 2. So once you reboot, rewire, kind of get control of your life, it's one to help these men step into the next phase and become the men that they're all created to be. We have a really in-depth curriculum that's going to take you through 11 superhuman virtues: courage, confidence, respect, communication, over the course of a year-long commitment. It's going to allow you to step into, better leadership within your life, better leadership within your family, better leadership within your corporate job or your business. So just really excited about, but there's a lot going on. But those resources, Coach Frank Rich on any of the platforms, or you can get the 7-Step Guide at the7stepguide.com.
All right. Thank you so much. His name is Frank Rich. He is the host of the Superhuman Life podcast, and he is doing kingdom work. He's doing the work that he was called to do. And Frank, God bless you. I hope that your voice and your message takes off and goes everywhere that it needs to be. And I just can't thank you enough. We're going to have you back on the Turned On podcast soon. And for all of you guys, find him on Instagram, listen to his podcast, and we'll see you right here next time on the Turned On podcast.